Hello, welcome back to RetroBreak. You might remember at the end of last week's episode I mentioned a game called Quest Arrest. Well, it actually turned up in the post the same day that I uploaded that video. So I've been playing it all week and I've actually completed the game 5 separate times now. Once on the plane on the way back from Japan, and then 4 times the other day to capture all the footage for this video to give you guys a really in-depth look at everything there is to know about the game. So let's first begin this video with an unboxing and a look at the instruction manual before I take a deep dive into the game itself. Thank you all so much for watching so far, and please consider subscribing and checking out my Patreon if you enjoy this episode. So as you can already see, the packaging is absolutely fantastic. It's so close to being an official Game Boy box and instruction manual. As you can see, a lot of care and effort was put into the production value of this. But the thing that grabbed my interest most about the instruction manual were these concept screenshots from a colour version of the game. Nothing's officially been announced yet, but fingers crossed he is working on a colour version. I would love to play it in full colour. John Rue and Emmett from Budget Nostalgia actually signed my copy of the game, and that's just amazing. As you can see, the cartridge also looks really nice, and of course it plays just as well on an original Game Boy as it does on an emulator. So that's enough about the packaging, let's see what the game's all about. So the game begins with you outside of the police station. You've recently been promoted to a detective. You first have to go and speak to the police officer, gather your radio, and then be on your way to solve crime throughout the city. The city is broken up into 9 different areas, each with their own story and puzzles to solve. I really like how the game is structured. You can walk around the entire city from the start, but you will only be able to advance if you've managed to solve a certain crime or picked up a certain item in a different area. Like I mentioned in the intro, I've actually played through this game several times now, and there's a very good reason for that. Depending on how you play, you gain or lose credibility points. This means that different events in the game will play out differently, depending on whether you've decided to be a good cop or a bad cop. Arresting people will gain you credibility, and killing the enemies will turn the city against you. So it is a really interesting mechanic, and the way that it works is you find robbers and villains around the city that you need to arrest, and depending on whether you pass or fail, a Pokemon style minigame where you have to fight the robber. So the battle system is actually very interesting. Like I said, it's very similar to the Pokemon games, but instead of the standard attacks, you instead have 3 different attacks and the option to arrest the suspect. The pepper spray does the least amount of damage, followed by the taser and finally shooting, which will do the most damage. The idea is to get the suspect's health down low enough to attempt an arrest without killing them. If you do end up killing the suspect, that will lower your credibility and affect how people see you in the game world. You can also fail an arrest, which will also reduce the suspect's HP, so you do have to be very careful. I think it's a great system and it really works well in the context of the game. There's several other points in the game as well where you get to choose whether you want to address someone in a polite way or whether you just want to be a really horrible cop, and depending on what you choose, the outcome is completely different. And to make that a bit clearer in this video, I've actually color coded whether I was playing as a good cop, whether I was playing as a bad cop, or whether I was playing through the neutral story. So if you see any screens that are in blue, that means that I'm being a good cop. If you see any screens that are coloured in red, that means I was being the bad cop. And if you see any with this brown colour, that was my first playthrough when I just played through the entire game without stopping and not really thinking about the outcome. So the overall goal of the game is to investigate all of the different areas in the city and to try and arrest all the criminals, which will eventually lead you to find someone called Athena, and you have to stop a bank robbery, which is what she's been plotting. Throughout all the different areas in the game, you'll encounter little different stories and different puzzles to solve. I actually ended up drawing my own map and writing notes as to which order to do these things for my repeated playthroughs. Here's an example of a completely different scene depending on whether you played as a good or a bad cop. First, let's take a look at what happens if you play the good cop. And now, if you play as the bad cop, you actually get taken to a completely different area and a completely different outcome happens. The game isn't actually very long. It took me around an hour to finish on my first playthrough, and then a lot less after that once I figured out the right order to do things. I'm sure you can tell from this video though, it does have a lot of replay value, so I expect you'll get about 3 or 4 hours of good entertainment out of this game. And the great thing is, it's playable online for free. I'll put a link in the description so you can go and check it out on itch.io, as well as download the ROM for yourself to play on an original Game Boy. Unfortunately, the boxed copy that I showed off earlier was a limited release, and you may have missed out on purchasing one now, but definitely go and follow me on Twitter because I do talk a lot about other Homebrew releases, and you might be in with a chance of getting one of the other ones that I discuss in the future. So I'll put a link in the description so you can go and follow me on Twitter as well as links to Budget Nostalgia and the Retro Room Rue, the programmer and designer, and the artist for the game as well, so I'll put all of that in the description so you can go and check it out. Apart from the fantastic gameplay, I do have to bring up the graphics and the music as well. As you've probably seen already, the graphics are kind of a mixed bag. I really like the indoor sections, they look really good, but when you go out into the city, the backgrounds seem really zoomed in, so the pixels are actually really big and chunky, and it looks okay, but it can be quite difficult to make out some of the smaller details in the environment. So for example, in this area here, I didn't really know what I could stand on or what I couldn't, so that's a bit hit and miss, as well as the backgrounds not being that great. When you're actually in the battle, when you're fighting against the robber, some of the sprites look a little bit off as well. I think it's because they've just zoomed in on the smaller sprites that were on the overworld, but some of the pixels seem to be in different sizes, and that's kind of strange. The music, on the other hand, I'd say about 80% of it is really good. I really like the main theme when you're walking around, but some of the battle music can become a little grating after a while. And like you saw in the instruction manual at the start, I know that Rue has a lot more plans for games in the future, not just on the Game Boy, but also on more modern consoles and Steam as well. So definitely go and give him a follow if you want to keep up with his game development. I'm expecting great things from him. This is a fantastic first game. So if you were paying attention, you might have realised that I said I've played this game 5 times now, but I'm only actually showing it 3 times. Frustratingly for me, I actually ended up playing through the entire game and forgetting to press record on the computer. But the thing is that when I went back to check the file and realised it wasn't there, I'd enjoyed the game so much that I honestly didn't mind playing through it again. And I think it just goes to show how good this game was, that when I got to the end of that playthrough and went back to see the recording and realised it wasn't there, I wasn't upset, and in fact I was actually looking forward to playing through the whole game again. So I think that just goes to show that this game has fantastic replay value. Even after playing the game 5 times, I was still not bored of it. And I highly recommend it to anyone who's looking for a new RPG or adventure game for the Game Boy. So thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this in-depth look at Quest Arrest. Definitely recommend the game. Like I said, I'll put links in the description so you can go and download it, as well as checking out the developer's Twitter page. That's it for this episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. Consider checking out my Patreon. I'm going to be doing a lot more on there in the near future. That's it for now. I'll see you guys next week for the next episode. Goodbye.